The morning sun barely broke through the thick canopy of pine trees as Sergeant Elena Vasquez checked her rifle for the third time. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, every movement automatic after 12 years in the Army Rangers. The weapon felt like an extension of herself, familiar and reassuring in the growing tension of the forest. "Movement on the ridge," whispered Corporal Johnson through her earpiece. His voice carried that particular edge that meant trouble was coming fast. Elena pressed herself deeper into the rocky outcrop she had chosen as her position. Through her scope, she could see the problem clearly now. 3 separate groups of armed militants were moving through the valley below, and they had no idea about each other. Yet, the mission had started simple enough 3 days ago. Intelligence reported a hostage situation at a remote research facility deep in the mountains. Dr. Sarah Chun, a biochemist working on vaccine research, had been taken by a radical group calling themselves the Pure Earth Alliance. They wanted to destroy her work and make an example of what they called genetic manipulation. What intelligence had not reported was the presence of 2 other groups in the area: a drug cartel using the mountains as a smuggling route, and a separate terrorist cell that had been tracking the same research facility for months. Elena's team of 8 Rangers had walked into what was about to become a 3-way war zone. This is Overwatch." Elena spoke quietly into her radio, using her designated call sign. "I count 30-plus hostiles in 3 distinct groups. They appear unaware of each other's presence." Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled back through the static. "Copy that, Overwatch. What's your assessment?" Elena studied the terrain through her scope. The research facility sat in a natural bowl surrounded by steep hills. The Pure Earth Alliance had taken defensive positions around the main building. The cartel was moving up the eastern slope, probably planning to use the facility as a way station. The terrorist cell was approaching from the west, heavily armed and moving with military precision. "Sir, we have a problem," Elena reported. "When these groups make contact, Dr. Chun is going to be caught in the crossfire. The facility will become a killing field." The original plan had been surgical. Elena's team would provide Overwatch while 2 other Ranger teams moved in to extract the hostage. Clean, simple, quick. But war has a way of making simple plans complicated. "How long before contact?" Captain Rodriguez asked. Elena calculated distances and movement speeds in her head. 15 minutes, maybe 20 if we're lucky. Through her scope, she watched the cartel members spreading out along the ridgeline. These are not weekend warriors. Their movement patterns showed training, discipline, and experience. The lead man was scanning the valley with military-grade binoculars, and Elena knew it was only a matter of time before he spotted either the Alliance positions or the approaching terrorist cell. "Overwatch, can you identify the hostage location?" came the captain's voice. Elena shifted her scope to the main research building. The structure was modern and out of place in the wilderness setting, all glass and steel that reflected the morning light. She could see movement behind the windows on the 2nd floor, but the angle made it impossible to distinguish between hostages and captors. "Negative on hostage location," she reported. "Building has too much cover. I need a better angle." "Hold position," Captain Rodriguez ordered. "Alpha Team is moving to the north approach. Bravo Team will come in from the south. You maintain Overwatch and keep us informed of hostile movements." Elena acknowledged the order, but her mind was already working through the tactical problems. 2 teams against 3 enemy groups. Even with the element of surprise, the numbers were not good. And somewhere in that building was Dr. Chun, probably terrified and definitely in immediate danger once the shooting started. She watched the cartel team reach their objective point on the eastern ridge. The leader raised his binoculars again, and this time he held them steady for several long seconds. Elena knew he had spotted something. "Contact in approximately 10 minutes, she warned. "Eastern Group has visual on someone." The terrorist cell was now within 300 meters of the facility's western perimeter. Elena could see they carried assault rifles, grenades, and what looked like breaching charges. Their leader was making hand signals, positioning his men for what appeared to be a coordinated assault on the building. Elena's breathing slowed as she entered the zone that every sniper knows. The world narrowed to what she could see through her scope, and time seemed to stretch. She calculated wind speed, range, elevation changes. Her rifle was zeroed for 600 meters, and the longest shot she might need to take was just over 700. Through her earpiece, she heard Alpha Team leader check in. Alpha Team in position. We count 8 hostiles around the building perimeter. Bravo Team set, came another voice. We have eyes on the building. No clear shot at entry points. Elena watched the cartel leader lower his binoculars and start talking rapidly into a radio. Bad news. Very bad news. All teams, this is Overwatch, Elena reported urgently. Eastern Group is communicating. They've definitely spotted something and are calling it in, as if summoned by her words. Elena saw muzzle flashes from the eastern ridge. The cartel had opened fire on the Alliance positions around the building. Within seconds, return fire was coming from the building and the surrounding defensive positions. Then, the terrorist cell, apparently deciding this was their moment, charged the western side of the building. Contact! Contact! Voices shouted through the radio. All sides engaged. Elena found herself in the unique position of having the best view of a battle that was spiraling out of control. Through her scope, she could see Alliance fighters running between buildings, trying to establish defensive lines against attacks from 2 directions. Cartel members were advancing down the eastern slope under covering fire. The terror cell had reached the building and was preparing to breach the western wall. Overwatch, we need intel. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos. Where can we insert? Elena studied the battlefield developing below her. The north approach that Alpha Team was using would put them directly in the line of fire between the Alliance and the cartel. The south approach would run Bravo Team straight into the retreating Alliance fighters. Sir, both approaches are compromised, she reported. You need a new plan. Through her scope, she watched an explosion bloom against the western wall of the research building. The terror cell had breached the wall and was pouring inside. Elena knew that Dr. Chen's time was running out fast. Alpha Team, hold position, Captain Rodriguez ordered. Bravo Team, find cover and maintain. Elena understood the captain's dilemma. Sending his teams into that chaos would likely get them all killed without helping the hostage. But staying back meant leaving Dr. Chen to whatever the terrorists had planned. She watched Alliance fighters falling back toward the main building, trying to escape the cartel's advancing fire. Several were wounded, leaving trails of blood on the concrete. The morning air was now thick with smoke from weapons fire and the explosion. Then, she saw something that changed everything. A figure appeared at a second-story window of the research building. Even at distance, Elena could see it was a woman in civilian clothes, hands zip-tied behind her back. Dr. Chun. She was being held at the window by someone Elena couldn't see, probably as a human shield against the attacking cartel. Hostage visual confirmed, Elena reported. Second floor, north-facing window. Appears to be restrained with hands behind back. Can you take a shot? Captain Rodriguez asked immediately. Elena studied the situation through her scope. The hostage was clearly visible, but her captor was staying behind cover. The angle was difficult, and there were multiple friendly forces in the area. Most importantly, Elena couldn't see enough of the captor to guarantee a clean shot that wouldn't risk hitting Dr. Chun. Negative on clean shot, she reported. Too much risk to hostage. The battle below was intensifying. The cartel had reached the bottom of the slope and was now engaging Alliance fighters at close range. Automatic weapons fire echoed off the surrounding hills. Elena could see bodies falling on both sides. Meanwhile, the terror cell had disappeared inside the building. Elena caught glimpses of movement through other windows, shadows of armed figures moving through the halls. They were hunting for something, probably DR, Chen's research materials, but they had to know about the hostage situation by now. Alpha Team moving, came the radio call. We're going to try the eastern approach while they're engaged with the cartel. Elena watched Alpha Team's movement through her scope. They were using the chaos of the Cartel Alliance firefight as cover, staying low and moving fast. It was a smart plan, but Elena could see problems developing. Alpha Team, hold, she called urgently. Cartel Team, moving to your position. Through her scope, she watched 3 cartel members break away from the main engagement. They were flanking around the building, probably trying to find another way in. Their movement would take them directly across Alpha Team's approach route. I see them, Alpha Team leader responded. We'll adjust. But Elena could see that adjustment would put Alpha Team in the open at exactly the wrong moment. The cartel flankers were moving fast, and they would reach the intersection point before Alpha Team could find new cover. This was the moment every sniper trains for, and hopes never comes. Multiple friendly forces in danger, enemies closing in, and split seconds to make decisions that would determine who lived and who died. Elena took a deep breath and settled her scope on the lead cartel flanker. Range, 640 meters. Wind, minimal but shifting. Moving target. Friendly forces nearby. Alpha Team, when I engage, move fast to the drainage ditch on your left, she radioed. Her finger found the trigger as she led the target slightly, accounting for his movement and the bullet's travel time. She exhaled slowly, finding that perfect moment between heartbeats when the world goes still. The shot cracked across the valley like thunder. Through her scope, Elena watched the lead cartel member drop. The other 2 immediately took cover, scanning frantically for the source of a shot. That gave Alpha Team the seconds they needed to reach the drainage ditch. Good shot, Overwatch, Alpha Team leader reported. We're in position. But Elena's attention was already shifting. The gunshot had drawn attention from multiple directions. She could see Alliance fighters pointing toward her position, and worse, she spotted one of the terrorists at a building window, scanning the hillside with binoculars. She had revealed her position to take the shot that saved Alpha Team. Now she was about to become the hunted instead of the hunter. Through her scope, she watched the terrorist with binoculars pause in his scanning. He had found her position. Elena saw him lower the binoculars and grab a radio. Overwatch is compromised, she reported calmly. They've spotted my position. Fall back to secondary position. Captain Rodriguez ordered immediately. Elena was already moving before the order finished. She grabbed her rifle and began sliding backward down the reverse slope of her position. Behind her, she heard the distinctive whistle of incoming mortar rounds. The explosions came in a tight pattern, exactly where she had been lying 30 seconds earlier. Rock fragments and pine needles rained down around her as she low-crawled toward the fallback position she had prepared that morning. Finding cover behind a fallen log, Elena set up her rifle again and keyed her radio. Overwatch repositioned. I maintained visual on target building. Through her scope, she could see the battle had grown more intense during her movement. The cartel had pushed closer to the building, and Alliance fighters were now defending from prepared positions around the structure. Smoke was rising from several points, and Elena counted at least 6 bodies in the open areas. More concerning was the lack of movement at the second-story window where she had seen Dr. Chun. Either the hostage had been moved deeper into the building, or something had happened to her during the escalating violence. Bravo Team in position for building approach, came a radio call. Elena shifted her scope to locate Bravo Team. She found them in good cover about 200 meters from the building's south side. The approach looked clear, but Elena knew appearances could be deceiving. Bravo Team, be advised, she radioed. Unknown number of hostiles inside building. Last visual on hostage was second floor, but she's been moved. Elena continued scanning the building through her scope. The explosions and gunfire had shattered most of the ground floor windows, and she could see movement in several rooms. Dark shapes that could be either Alliance fighters or terrorists, all moving with weapons ready. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold. At a first-floor window, facing the cartel advance, a figure appeared carrying what looked like a large canvas bag. Even at distance, Elena could see the bag was heavy and struggled to move. The figure positioned the bag near the window and began working on something Elena couldn't quite see. All teams, priority message. Elena radioed urgently. Possible explosive device being prepared at building. First floor, southeast window. Her scope wasn't powerful enough to confirm exactly what she was seeing, but every instinct honed by years of combat told her this was very bad news. The figure at the window was working with focused intensity, completely ignoring the gunfire happening around the building. Overwatch, can you engage? Captain Rodriguez asked. Elena studied the shot carefully. The target was partially exposed, but the angle was difficult and the range was at the extreme end of what she could reliably hit. More importantly, if she was wrong about the explosive device, she might kill someone who was actually trying to help. Uncertain target identification, she reported. Need closer confirmation. Alpha Team moving to investigate, came the response. Elena watched Alpha Team begin their approach to the building. They were using fire and movement tactics, advancing in pairs while the others provided covering fire. Professional and by the book, but Elena could see they had no idea about the potential bomb threat. Through her scope, she kept watching the figure at the window. Whatever they were working on was almost complete. The person stepped back from the window briefly, and Elena caught a glimpse of multiple wires and what looked like a timing device. Alpha Team, abort approach, she radioed. Confirmed explosive device at southeast window. But her warning came too late. Alpha Team was already within the blast radius when the figure at the window connected the final wire. Elena watched in helpless horror as the entire southeast corner of the building erupted in flame and debris. The explosion was massive, far larger than anything she had expected. It sent a shock wave across the valley that she could feel even from her distant position. When the smoke cleared, Elena could see the building's structure had been severely damaged. The entire southeast section had collapsed, and fires were burning throughout the interior. There was no movement from Alpha Team's last known position. Alpha Team, report. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried a desperate edge. Static answered him. Elena scanned frantically through her scope, looking for any sign of Alpha Team survivors. The explosion had created a crater where they had been advancing, surrounded by scattered debris and equipment. Then she saw movement, one figure dragging another away from the blast site. Both were clearly injured but alive. Alpha Team survivors spotted, Elena reported. 2 personnel visible, both wounded, moving away from blast site. Bravo Team, abort building approach, Captain Rodriguez ordered. Overwatch, we need extraction options for Alpha Team wounded. Elena was already studying the terrain, looking for routes the rescue team could use. The problem was that the explosion had drawn attention from all 3 enemy groups. She could see cartel members moving toward the blast site, probably thinking it was an opportunity to advance. Alliance fighters were also repositioning, and she had no idea what the terrorists inside the building were planning next. Through her scope, she watched the 2 Alpha Team survivors reach partial cover behind an overturned vehicle. One was clearly unconscious or severely wounded, while the other was trying to provide first aid with limited supplies. Wounded Alpha Team members in cover behind vehicle, approximately 100 meters southeast of building, Elena reported. One appears ambulatory, one does not. She continued scanning for threats and opportunities. The cartel advance had been disrupted by the explosion, but they were regrouping. The Alliance fighters seemed to be pulling back from the building, probably assuming it was some kind of trap. Most concerning was the lack of information about the terrorists inside the building. Elena hadn't seen Dr. Chun since before the explosion, and she had no way to know if the hostage was even still alive. Overwatch, I need options, Captain Rodriguez radioed. Elena studied the tactical situation carefully. The building was heavily damaged and probably unstable. Multiple enemy groups were in the area, all armed and dangerous. Her own position was compromised, and she had limited ammunition for long-range shots. But 2 Rangers were wounded and trapped, and somewhere a civilian hostage needed rescue. She keyed her radio with the steady calm that had made her one of the most trusted snipers in the Rangers. Sir, I have a plan. Elena's plan was dangerous, but it was their only option. She had counted 17 cartel members still active after the explosion, an unknown number of Alliance fighters pulling back to defensive positions, and at least 6 terrorists somewhere inside the damaged building. The math was not good, but Rangers don't surrender just because the odds are bad. Sir, I can provide covering fire for a Bravo team extraction of Alpha team wounded, Elena radioed. But I need to relocate to a position with better angles on the vehicle. Captain Rodriguez was quiet for several seconds, probably calculating the same terrible odds Elena had worked out. What do you need? Elena was already scanning for her next position. The hillside offered several options, but each came with significant risks. The closest position that would give her the angle she needed was only 400 meters from the battle zone. That would put her well within range of return fire from multiple directions. I need 15 minutes to reposition, she reported. Then Bravo team can move on my signal. Negative, came the captain's immediate response. Too much risk. We'll find another way. Through her scope, Elena watched one of the wounded Alpha team members trying to drag his unconscious teammate to better cover. The man was clearly struggling, probably injured himself, and they were still exposed to fire from multiple directions. Sir, with respect, there is no other way, Elena replied. They're sitting ducks out there. She could see cartel members advancing again, using the smoke and debris as cover. The Alliance fighters had established a new defensive line further from the building, but that meant the wounded Rangers were now in no man's land between hostile forces. Elena made her decision without waiting for permission. Moving to position 3. Begin extraction sequence in 20 minutes. She was already sliding down the reverse slope of her hill before Captain Rodriguez could respond. Behind her, she heard his voice through static. Overwatch. That's a direct order to hold position. But Elena was committed now. She had seen too many good soldiers die because someone waited for perfect conditions that never came. Sometimes you had to make the hard choice and hope your training was enough to get you through. Position 3 was a rocky outcrop that would give her clear sight lines to the trapped Rangers and most of the surrounding area. It was also dangerously exposed to return fire, but Elena had been in worse spots during her deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. Moving fast but carefully, she worked her way around the hillside. The sounds of sporadic gunfire echoed across the valley as the different groups probed each other's positions. Elena could tell from the pattern of shots that none of the groups had committed to a full assault yet. They were all being cautious, which might work in her favor. She reached position 3 and immediately began setting up her rifle. The new angle was much better. She had clear sight lines to the overturned vehicle where the wounded Rangers were sheltering, and she could cover most of the approaches Bravo team would need to use. Through her scope, she assessed the tactical situation. The wounded Ranger was still conscious and had managed to drag his teammate into slightly better cover. Both men were alive, but Elena could see blood on their uniforms. Tom was not on their side. Overwatch in position 3, she radioed. Clear sight lines established. Bravo team ready for extraction. Elena, get back to your original position. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried an edge of command authority. That's a direct order. Elena ignored the order and continued her tactical assessment. She could see 3 cartel members moving toward the wounded Rangers from the east. They were being careful, but their route would bring them within 200 meters of the vehicle in less than 10 minutes. Sir, cartel advance on wounded personnel, she reported. 3 hostiles approaching from grid reference 247 to 891. Through her scope, she lined up a shot on the lead cartel member. Range was just over 500 meters, well within her capabilities. The target was moving slowly, checking for threats, unaware that Elena had relocated. Bravo team, begin extraction in 5 minutes, Elena radioed. I'll suppress hostile advance. Overwatch, abort. Captain Rodriguez ordered. Do not engage without authorization. Elena understood the captain's position. Engaging now would reveal her new location and draw fire from multiple directions. It would also commit Bravo team to an extraction under fire with no guarantee of success. By the book, it was the wrong call. But Elena had learned in 12 years of combat that sometimes the book was wrong. She settled into her shooting position and controlled her breathing. Through her scope, the lead cartel member was clearly visible, assault rifle ready, moving with practiced stealth toward the wounded Rangers. Elena's finger found the trigger as she calculated the shot. Slight crosswind from the left, target moving slowly from right to left, range 520 meters. She led the target slightly and waited for the perfect moment. The shot cracked across the valley. Through her scope, Elena watched the cartel member drop instantly. The other two immediately sought cover and began scanning for the shooter's position. Contact. Overwatch engaging. Elena radioed as she shifted to find her next target. All teams, Overwatch is engaged. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried resignation. Bravo team, execute extraction. Move fast. Elena could see Bravo team beginning their movement across the open ground toward the wounded Rangers. They were using good tactics, bounding from cover to cover, but they would still be exposed for several dangerous minutes. Through her scope, Elena tracked the remaining cartel members near the vehicle. One had taken cover behind a concrete barrier and was trying to locate her position. The other had moved closer to the vehicle and was preparing to engage Bravo team. Elena lined up her second shot. This target was partially concealed and at a more difficult angle. Range 540 meters, wind gusting irregularly, moving target with limited exposure. She waited for the target to expose himself for a clear shot. Patience was a sniper's greatest weapon, but Bravo team was running out of time. The cartel member leaned out from cover to get a better angle on the approaching Rangers. Elena had maybe 2 seconds of clean shot before he could fire on her teammates. Her second shot took him center mass, but the muzzle flash from her rifle had given away her position. Almost immediately, Elena heard the distinctive crack of incoming rifle rounds passing close to her head. Taking fire, she reported calmly while shifting position behind the rocks. Multiple shooters have my location. Through her scope, she could see muzzle flashes from at least 4 different positions. The cartel, alliance fighters, and probably terrorists from the building were all shooting at her rocky outcrop. Elena low-crawled to a different firing position as bullets chipped granite around her previous location. The incoming fire was accurate, but not precisely targeted, which meant they could see her general position, but not her exact location. From her new position, she could see Bravo team had reached the wounded Rangers. 2 team members were providing security, while the other 2 worked to prepare the casualties for movement. Bravo team at objective came the radio call. We need 2 minutes for casualty preparation. Elena knew they didn't have 2 minutes. She could see Alliance fighters moving to flank Bravo team's position, and more cartel members were advancing from multiple directions. Through her scope, she identified the most immediate threat. 3 Alliance fighters moving along a drainage ditch that would give them a perfect angle on Bravo team's position. Elena lined up her third shot of the engagement. Range 480 meters, targets moving in cover, limited exposure time. She would have to be perfect. The lead Alliance fighter raised his head to check Bravo team's position. Elena's shot took him instantly. The other 2 immediately went aground, but their advance was stopped. Multiple hostiles converging on extraction site, Elena reported while scanning for her next target. Bravo team needs to move now. 30 seconds, came the response from Bravo team leader. Elena could see that 30 seconds might as well be 30 minutes. Cartel members were advancing from 2 directions, and she had spotted movement that suggested the terrorists were finally leaving the building to join the fight. More incoming fire forced Elena to change position again. The shots were getting closer, and she could hear voices shouting in Spanish somewhere below her position. They were trying to coordinate an assault on her outcrop. Through her scope, Elena saw Bravo team beginning to move with the 2 casualties. One wounded Ranger was conscious and could walk with assistance. The other was being carried on an improvised stretcher made from equipment. Their movement was slow and exposed. Elena knew they would never make it across the open ground without heavy covering fire. She began engaging targets systematically. A cartel member trying to flank from the east. An alliance fighter moving to a better firing position. Another cartel member preparing to engage the extraction team. Each shot revealed her position more precisely to the enemy forces, and return fire was getting more accurate. Elena could hear bullets striking the rocks just inches from her head. "Overwatch, fall back," Captain Rodriguez ordered. "You've done enough." Elena ignored the order and continued engaging targets. Through her scope, she watched Bravo team making progress toward their extraction point, but they were still dangerously exposed. Then she saw movement that made her heart sink. At least 8 terrorists were emerging from the damaged building, all heavily armed and moving with obvious military training. They were heading directly toward Bravo team's route. "Bravo team, 8 hostiles emerging from building," Elena reported. "Armed and organized. Adjust route immediately." Elena shifted her scope to the terrorist group. They were moving in formation, covering each other's movement, advancing with clear purpose. These were not amateur fighters. She lined up a shot on their leader, a tall man carrying what looked like a squad automatic weapon. Range 420 meters, target moving with tactical awareness, multiple other hostiles nearby. Elena took the shot and watched the terrorist leader drop. But instead of scattering, the remaining terrorists immediately took cover and began laying down suppressive fire toward both Elena's position and Bravo team. "Taking heavy fire," Bravo team leader reported. "We're pinned down." Elena could see the problem clearly through her scope. Bravo team had taken cover in a depression that protected them from the terrorists, but they were now exposed to fire from the cartel members advancing from another direction. She was watching her teammates get caught in a crossfire with no good options for escape. Elena made another decision that would have horrified her commanders. She stood up from her concealed position, fully exposing herself on the rocky outcrop, and began engaging every hostile target she could identify. "Overwatch going loud," she radioed. "All teams, when I draw their fire, Bravo team moves fast." Standing exposed, Elena could see the entire battlefield clearly. She began putting rounds down range as fast as she could acquire targets, using her elevated position and clear sight lines to maximum advantage. A cartel member preparing to engage Bravo team. Shot. An alliance fighter moving to flank. Shot. A terrorist trying to advance on the extraction team. Shot. Every enemy fighter in the valley now knew exactly where Elena was located, and they all began shooting at her position. Bullets filled the air around her, striking rocks and whistling past her head. But the incoming fire also meant that none of them were shooting at Bravo team. "Moving," came the call from Bravo team leader. Through her scope, Elena could see them running across open ground, carrying the wounded Rangers toward their extraction point. They were exposed and vulnerable, but all hostile fire was now directed at Elena's position. She continued engaging targets, shifting position constantly as incoming rounds tried to zero in on her location. A bullet grazed her left shoulder, spinning her around, but she kept shooting. Another round struck her rifle scope, shattering the optics and rendering her precision shooting capability useless. Elena transitioned to her backup iron sights and continued engaging at shorter ranges. The shots were less precise, but at distances under 300 meters, she could still hit center mass on most targets. "Bravo team clear," came the radio call. "Extraction complete." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed immediately by the realization that she was now alone on a hilltop with multiple enemy groups trying to kill her. She had accomplished the mission. The wounded Rangers were safe, and Bravo team was withdrawing to the rally point. But Elena was still surrounded by hostile forces, her rifle was damaged, and her position was completely compromised. "Overwatch, status report," Captain Rodriguez radioed. Elena assessed her situation quickly. She was down to her sidearm and whatever ammunition remained for her damaged rifle. She could see enemy fighters moving up the hillside toward her position from multiple directions. "Position compromised, scope destroyed, multiple hostiles advancing on my location," she reported. I'm going to need that extraction sooner rather than later. Through her damaged scope, Elena could see the building where Dr. Chun was supposedly being held. Smoke was still rising from the explosion damage, and she had seen no sign of the hostage since the fighting began. The terrorists who had emerged from the building were now split between pursuing Bravo team and advancing on Elena's position. But that meant some of them might still be in the building with Dr. Chun. Elena made one more tactical assessment. The cartel and Alliance fighters were focused on her position now. The terrorists were divided. If there was ever going to be an opportunity to locate and rescue the hostage, it would be now, while most of the opposition was distracted. She keyed her radio with an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Sir, I think we can still get Dr. Chun." Captain Rodriguez's response came through static and disbelief. "Elena, you're surrounded by hostiles and your equipment is damaged. Focus on your own extraction." But Elena was studying the tactical situation with the cold calculation that had kept her alive through dozens of combat operations. The building was partially collapsed. Most of the terrorists had left to engage her position or pursue Bravo team, and the other hostile groups were focused on the hilltop, where she was attracting all their attention. "Sir, most opposition elements are engaged with my position," Elena reported while scanning the building through her damaged scope. "Building appears lightly defended. This may be our only window." Elena could see movement through the intact windows on the second floor. Someone was still inside, and given that the terrorists had left most of their people behind to chase her team, it was likely Dr. Chun and a minimal guard force. "Negative," Captain Rodriguez replied firmly. "We've completed the primary mission. Alpha Team casualties are secure, and we're not risking more personnel." Elena understood the captain's position, but she also understood something he couldn't see from his command position. Dr. Chun was still alive in that building, and the window of opportunity to rescue her was closing rapidly. Through her iron sights, Elena could see the terrorist fighters advancing up her hillside. They were moving carefully but steadily, and she estimated they would reach her position in less than 10 minutes. Behind them, cartel and Alliance forces were also converging on the rocky outcrop where she had made her stand. But Elena had spent 12 years learning to see opportunities that others missed. "Sir, I can reach the building," Elena radioed. "The backside is clear, and I have a route down the reverse slope." She was already moving as she spoke, sliding down the backside of her rocky position while enemy forces climbed the front. Elena had identified her escape route during her initial reconnaissance, and now she was committed to using it for something much more dangerous than withdrawal. "Elena, that's a direct order." Captain Rodriguez's voice carried absolute command authority. "Extract to the rally point immediately." Elena switched off her radio. She knew she was violating direct orders, risking court-martial, and probably ending her military career. But she also knew that Dr. Chun was an innocent civilian whose research could save lives, and Elena had never walked away from someone who needed help. Moving fast down the hillside, Elena could hear the sounds of her pursuers reaching the rocky outcrop behind her. Shouts in multiple languages told her they had discovered her escape route, but she had a significant head start. The terrain worked in her favor. Dense pine forest and rocky ground provided concealment, and Elena had studied every approach route during her initial positioning. She knew exactly where she was going and how to get there without exposing herself to observation. Behind her, she could hear the pursuit forming up. The different hostile groups were apparently coordinating now, probably realizing that the lone sniper had been their primary threat. That coordination meant Elena was facing organized, disciplined opposition rather than random gunfire. Elena reached the bottom of the hillside and assessed her approach to the building. The structure was about 200 meters away across relatively open ground. The explosion had created debris fields that would provide some cover, but the approach would still be dangerous. Through her damaged scope, Elena could see two terrorist guards at ground-level positions around the building. Both were alert and scanning for threats, but they were focused on the directions where the other hostile groups were located. Elena checked her equipment. Her rifle was functional despite the destroyed scope, and she had 4 magazines of ammunition remaining. Her sidearm was fully loaded with 2 spare magazines. She also carried standard Ranger assault equipment, grenades, breaching charges, medical supplies, and communications gear. Elena had been in worse situations with less equipment, but she had never attempted a solo hostage rescue against multiple hostile groups. She began her approach using every piece of cover available. The explosion debris provided concealment for the first 100 meters, and Elena moved from pile to pile like a deadly game of hide and seek. At 50 meters from the building, Elena could hear voices from inside. Multiple people were talking, but she couldn't distinguish languages or determine how many hostiles were present. She also heard something that made her heart race. A woman's voice, clearly distressed, speaking what sounded like English. Dr. Chun was alive and inside the building. Elena moved to the blast hole that the terrorists had created in the building's wall. The opening was large enough for easy access, but entering would expose her to unknown threats inside the structure. She listened carefully at the entrance. The voices were coming from the second floor, directly above her position. Elena could distinguish at least 3 different speakers, all male, and 1 female voice that had to be Dr. Chun. Elena entered the building through the blast hole, weapon ready, and senses alert for any sign of guards or booby traps. The interior was a mess of collapsed walls, scattered equipment, and smoke damage from the explosion. She found a stairway that was still intact and began moving toward the second floor. Each step was carefully placed to avoid debris that might create noise. Elena had practiced silent movement thousands of times, but never when so much depended on not being detected. At the top of the stairs, Elena could hear the conversation more clearly. 3 men were discussing something in accented English, occasionally switching to what sounded like Arabic. Dr. Chin's voice was answering questions, but Elena could hear the stress and fear in her responses. Elena moved down the hallway toward the voices, her rifle ready and safety off. Through a partially open door, she could see into the room where the hostage was being held. Dr. Chun was sitting in a chair, hands zip-tied behind her back, looking exhausted and frightened but unharmed. 3 armed men stood around her, 2 holding assault rifles, and 1 with a pistol pointed in her general direction. The man with the pistol was asking questions about Dr. Chen's research, specifically about where backup data files were stored. Elena realized they were interrogating the hostage for information about her work rather than simply holding her for ransom. Elena assessed the tactical situation. 3 armed hostiles in a confined space with a civilian hostage in immediate danger. The range was less than 20 meters, which meant her damaged rifle would be accurate enough for precise shots. But she would need to eliminate all 3 threats simultaneously to prevent harm to Dr. Chun. Through the doorway, Elena could see that 1 hostile was directly behind Dr. Chun, using her as partial cover. The other 2 were positioned where they could react quickly to any threat. Elena needed a distraction to draw the hostiles away from the hostage before she could engage. She pulled a flashbang grenade from her equipment and calculated the throw angle. The blast would disorient the hostiles without seriously injuring Dr. Chun if Elena positioned it correctly. Elena pulled the pin and counted down the timer. 3 seconds. 2. 1. She threw the flashbang through the doorway and immediately covered her eyes and ears. The explosion was deafening in the confined space, followed by shouts of confusion and the sound of people moving rapidly. Elena entered the room immediately after the blast, rifle ready. The 3 hostiles were disoriented and stumbling, their vision and hearing compromised by the flashbang. Elena engaged the first target, the man who had been holding the pistol near Dr. Chun. 1 shot, center mass, and he dropped instantly. The second hostile was trying to raise his assault rifle despite his disorientation. Elena's second shot took him before his weapon came on target. The third man was behind overturned furniture, partially concealed but still holding his rifle. Elena could see Dr. Chun in her peripheral vision, conscious but clearly affected by the flashbang blast. Elena waited for the third hostile to expose himself for a clear shot. Patience and precision were still her greatest weapons, even in close-quarters combat. The man raised his head to locate Elena, and her third shot ended the threat. Elena immediately moved to Dr. Chun, keeping her rifle ready in case there were additional hostiles nearby. Dr. Chun, I'm Sergeant Vasquez, U.S. Army Rangers, Elena said while cutting the zip ties with her combat knife. We're here to get you out. Dr. Chun looked at Elena with a mixture of relief and confusion. Are you alone? I heard gunfire outside for hours. Long story. Elena replied while helping Dr. Chun to her feet. Can you walk? We need to move fast. Dr. Chun nodded, though Elena could see she was shaky from her ordeal. I can walk, but my research data... Where? Elena asked while scanning the room for threats. Dr. Chun pointed to a laptop computer on a desk near the window. Everything's on there. If they get it, Elena understood immediately. Dr. Chin's vaccine research would be exactly what terrorist groups would want to steal or destroy. The laptop contained information that could save thousands of lives or cause significant harm if misused. Elena grabbed the laptop and secured it in her equipment bag. Got it. Now we move. She led Dr. Chun toward the door, but stopped when she heard voices from the hallway. Multiple people were climbing the stairs, talking in Arabic and moving with obvious urgency. Elena realized the other terrorists had returned to the building, probably alerted by the gunfire from the room. She and Dr. Chun were now trapped on the second floor with an unknown number of hostiles between them and the exit. How many people were holding you? Elena asked quietly. 6 or 7 total, Dr. Chun whispered. 3 here, and the others were downstairs or outside. Elena did quick math. She had eliminated 3 hostiles, which meant there were still 3 or 4 armed terrorists somewhere in the building. And they now knew exactly where Elena and Dr. Chun were located. Through the room's window, Elena could see hostile forces still climbing the hillside where she had been positioned earlier. They hadn't given up the search, which meant her escape routes were still compromised. Elena assessed their options. They were trapped on the second floor of a partially collapsed building, surrounded by multiple hostile groups, with limited ammunition and a civilian to protect. But Elena had been in impossible situations before, and Rangers don't quit just because the mission gets complicated. Dr. Chun, do you know the building layout? Elena asked while checking her remaining ammunition. I designed it, Dr. Chun replied with a hint of strength returning to her voice. I know every room and corridor. Elena smiled grimly. That was the first good news she'd had all day. Then, you're going to help me get us both out of here. Elena could hear the terrorists moving through the building below them, searching room by room. They were being systematic and careful, which meant Elena and Dr. Chun had maybe 5 minutes before the hostiles reached their floor. Is there another way down? Elena asked. Dr. Chun thought for a moment, then nodded. Emergency stairs at the back of the building. But they're near the explosion damage. I don't know if they're still intact. Elena weighed their options. Unknown stairway versus certain hostile contact. Sometimes the risky choice was actually the safer choice. Show me, Elena said. Dr. Chun led Elena through the damaged building, stepping carefully around debris and collapsed sections. The emergency stairs were at the far end of the building, away from where Elena had entered. Through broken windows, Elena could see that some of the hostile forces had spread out around the building perimeter. Their escape route would be observed, but Elena was running out of alternatives. They reached the emergency stairs, and Elena could see they were damaged but still functional. The explosion had weakened some supports, but the structure appeared stable enough to support their weight. Elena heard voices from the main part of the building. The terrorists had reached the second floor and were beginning their room-by-room search. Dr. Chun, when we go down these stairs, we'll be exposed to hostile fire, Elena explained quietly. I need you to stay directly behind me and do exactly what I tell you. Dr. Chun nodded, her face showing determination despite her fear. Elena led the way down the emergency stairs, rifle ready and senses alert for any sign of hostile contact. Behind her, Dr. Chun moved as quietly as possible, given her civilian training. At the bottom of the stairs, Elena could see their escape route across open ground to the tree line. The distance was about 150 meters, mostly uphill, with minimal cover available. Elena also saw two hostile fighters positioned to observe exactly the route they needed to use. She was about to attempt a hostage rescue extraction against prepared positions with a civilian who had no combat training. Elena checked her equipment one more time and made her final tactical assessment. This was going to require every skill she had learned in 12 years of Rangers training. Dr. Chun, Elena said quietly, "When I say run, you run for those trees and don't look back." Elena studied the two hostile fighters through her damaged scope. They were positioned about 70 meters apart, both with good fields of fire covering the escape route to the tree line. Professional positioning that suggested military training. "Dr. Chun, I need you to listen very carefully," Elena whispered. "When I engage those two targets, you run straight for the trees. Don't zigzag, don't look back, don't stop for anything. Understand?" Dr. Chun nodded, though Elena could see her hands shaking. "What about you?" Elena was calculating ammunition and distances. Two targets at medium range, with iron sights only. Possible, but challenging. "I'll be right behind you." Elena lined up her first shot through the iron sights. Range approximately 200 meters. Target partially concealed behind debris. Crosswind minimal. Without her scope, this would require perfect technique. She controlled her breathing and found the natural pause between heartbeats. The first hostile was scanning the building with binoculars, focused on the upper floors where gunfire had been heard. Elena's shot took him center mass. The second hostile immediately sought cover and began scanning for the shooter's position. Elena had maybe 5 seconds before he located her and returned fire. "Run," Elena commanded. Dr. Chun sprinted from the emergency stairs toward the tree line, while Elena shifted position to engage the second target. The hostile had taken cover behind a concrete barrier, but Elena could see part of his rifle barrel and shoulder. Elena waited for him to expose himself for a return shot. Through the iron sights, she tracked his partial movements behind cover. When he leaned out to fire toward Dr. Chin's running figure, Elena was ready. Her second shot struck him before he could complete his aim. Elena immediately began running after Dr. Chun, but she could hear shouts from inside the building. The remaining terrorists had heard the gunfire and were responding quickly. Dr. Chun was halfway to the tree line, running harder than Elena would have expected from a civilian. The researcher had clearly found reserves of strength and determination when faced with life-or-death circumstances. Elena caught up with Dr. Chun as they reached the edge of the forest. Both women were breathing hard, but they had successfully escaped the building and immediate hostile contact. "Keep moving," Elena said while checking behind them for pursuit. "We need distance and cover." Elena led Dr. Chun into the forest, using game trails and natural concealment to put distance between them and the building. Behind them, she could hear vehicles starting and the sounds of organized search activity. After 20 minutes of hard movement through dense forest, Elena called a halt in a concealed position overlooking the valley. She could see the building in the distance, now surrounded by vehicles and personnel from multiple hostile groups. Elena activated her radio, hoping Captain Rodriguez was still monitoring her frequency despite her earlier disobedience. "Base, this is Overwatch," Elena transmitted. "I have the package." "Repeat, I have Dr. Chun, and we are clear of hostile contact." Static answered her for several seconds before Captain Rodriguez's voice came through, tight with controlled emotion. "Elena, confirm your status. Are you and Dr. Chun uninjured?" "Affirmative," Elena replied, while scanning the surrounding forest for threats. "Dr. Chun is mobile and unharmed. I have her research data secure." Elena could hear the relief in the captain's voice. "Outstanding work, Sergeant. What's your current position?" Elena checked her GPS and provided coordinates. "We're approximately 2 kilometers northeast of the target building. Request extraction instructions. Extraction team is en route to pick up Zone Alpha." Captain Rodriguez replied. Can you reach that location? Elena checked her map. Pickup Zone Alpha was 3 kilometers away through forest terrain. Normally an easy movement for trained rangers, but Dr. Chun was a civilian who had been under extreme stress for days. Affirmative, Elena replied. We'll need approximately 90 minutes for movement to Pickup Zone. Copy that. Be advised, multiple hostile groups are conducting active searches in your area. Maintain radio silence unless emergency. Elena acknowledged and turned off her radio to preserve battery and avoid detection. She looked at Dr. Chun, who was sitting against a tree looking exhausted but determined. How are you holding up, Doc? Elena asked. I've been better, Dr. Chun replied with a weak smile. But I'm alive thanks to you. I thought. She trailed off, clearly not wanting to think about what the terrorists had planned for her. Elena checked her equipment and remaining ammunition. She was down to 2 magazines for her rifle and 1 spare for her sidearm. Enough for defensive actions, but not enough for sustained combat if they encountered serious opposition. Dr. Chun, we have about a 3-hour hike to reach our extraction point, Elena explained. The terrain is rough, and there are hostile forces searching for us. I need to know honestly, can you make that distance? Dr. Chun stood up and tested her legs. Elena could see she was sore and tired, but there was determination in her eyes that reminded Elena why this woman was important enough to risk lives rescuing. I've done field research in some pretty remote places, Dr. Chun said. I can keep up. Elena led the way through the forest, setting a pace that would get them to the extraction point while conserving Dr. Chen's energy. Behind them, she could occasionally hear the sounds of search helicopters, but the forest canopy provided good concealment from aerial observation. After an hour of movement, Elena called another halt to assess their progress and check for pursuit. They had covered about half the distance to the extraction point, and Dr. Chun was keeping up better than Elena had expected. How did you end up out here? Dr. Chun asked during their rest break. Elena considered how much to explain about ranger operations and classified mission details. We got reports that you had been kidnapped. My team was sent to get you back. Your team? Dr. Chun said thoughtfully. How many people risked their lives to rescue me? Elena thought about Alpha Team's wounded members, Bravo Team's dangerous extraction under fire, and Captain Rodriguez coordinating multiple moving pieces of a complex operation. More than 20 Rangers were involved in this operation, Elena replied, plus support personnel, helicopter crews, intelligence analysts, and command staff. A lot of people wanted to bring you home safely. Dr. Chun was quiet for several minutes, clearly processing the scope of resources that had been committed to her rescue. My research, she finally said. It's important, but I never imagined. Your vaccine research could save thousands of lives, Elena said while scanning the forest for threats. That makes you important to a lot of people, both good and bad. Elena could hear vehicles in the distance, moving along roads that paralleled their route through the forest. The hostile groups were conducting a systematic search, probably trying to establish roadblocks and checkpoints to prevent their escape. We need to keep moving, Elena said. They're getting organized out there. Elena led Dr. Chun deeper into the forest, avoiding trails and roads where they might be observed. The terrain was getting steeper as they climbed toward the ridge where the extraction point was located. After another hour of movement, Elena heard something that made her signal for immediate halt and concealment. Voices. Multiple people moving through the forest, speaking in Arabic, and using tactical radio communications. Elena motioned for Dr. Chun to take cover behind a fallen log while she assessed the threat. Through the trees, she could see at least 6 armed figures moving in a loose search pattern. They were checking concealment spots and moving with obvious military training. Elena realized the terrorists had committed significant resources to recapturing Dr. Chun. These were not random fighters. They were trained soldiers conducting a professional search operation. Elena checked their position relative to the extraction point. They were still over a kilometer away, and the search team was directly between them and their destination. Elena had 3 options. wait for the search team to pass, and hope they weren't detected, attempt to circle around the search team through more difficult terrain, or engage the hostiles and try to fight through their position. All three options carried significant risks, especially with a civilian to protect. Elena made her decision based on tactical assessment and time factors. The search team was moving slowly but systematically. Waiting would likely result in detection. Circling around would add hours to their movement and might lead them into other search teams. Elena would have to eliminate the search team. She moved to Dr. Chen's position and whispered instructions. There's a hostile search team between us and our extraction point. I'm going to eliminate them, but I need you to stay here and remain absolutely silent. Dr. Chen looked at Elena with a mixture of fear and admiration. 6 against 1. Elena checked her rifle and remaining ammunition. I've had worse odds. Elena positioned Dr. Chen in the best concealment available and began moving to a position where she could engage the search team. The forest provided good cover for movement, and Elena used every piece of training from Ranger School and combat deployments. Through her iron sights, Elena identified the search team's leader, a tall man carrying advanced communications equipment and coordinating the team's movement. Taking him first would disrupt their coordination and create confusion. Elena lined up her shot from a concealed position approximately 150 meters from the target. Range was perfect for iron sights, and the target was moving predictably along a game trail. Elena controlled her breathing and waited for the perfect moment. Her shot dropped the team leader instantly. The remaining 5 hostiles immediately sought cover and began scanning for the shooter. But Elena was already moving to her next position, using the forest terrain to stay concealed while repositioning for follow-up shots. Elena engaged the second target from a different angle, taking him before he could establish a defensive position. The remaining 4 hostiles were now confused and unable to determine Elena's location. Elena continued moving and shooting, using superior knowledge of the terrain and ranger tactics against opponents who were skilled but unprepared for her level of precision and mobility. The third and fourth targets fell within minutes of each other, both eliminated before they could return effective fire. The remaining 2 hostiles had taken cover in good positions and were communicating by radio, probably calling for reinforcements. Elena knew she needed to finish this engagement quickly before additional hostile forces arrived. Elena circled to a position where she could see both remaining targets. They were in cover behind large rocks, but Elena could see portions of their positions from her elevated angle. She waited for one of them to expose himself for movement or observation. Patience was still her greatest weapon, even when time was working against her. When the first hostile raised his head to scan for Elena's position, her shot took him instantly. The last hostile, realizing he was alone and outmatched, began retreating through the forest. Elena could have taken a shot, but she decided to let him go. One survivor might report incorrect information about her position and capabilities. Elena returned to Dr. Chen's position, moving carefully in case other hostile forces were nearby. "Are you okay?" Dr. Chen asked when Elena reached her hiding spot. "All clear," Elena replied while scanning the forest for additional threats. "Time to move." Elena led Dr. Chen away from the engagement site, knowing that the area would soon be swarming with hostile forces investigating the gunfire. They needed to reach the extraction point before the enemy could establish a cordon around the area. The final kilometer to the extraction point was uphill through dense forest, but Elena could see they were going to make it. Behind them, she could hear helicopters and vehicles converging on the area where she had engaged the search team. As they reached the ridgeline where the extraction point was located, Elena could see a U.S. military helicopter approaching from the distance. "Dr. Chun," Elena said with relief evident in her voice. "Your ride is here." The Black Hawk helicopter settled into the small clearing with practiced precision, its rotor wash sending pine needles and debris swirling through the air. Elena could see the crew chief scanning the surrounding forest with his weapon ready. alert for any signs of hostile contact. Elena led Dr. Chun toward the helicopter, both women moving in a low crouch beneath the spinning rotors. The crew chief reached out to help Dr. Chun aboard while Elena provided security, rifle ready, and eyes scanning the tree line for threats. Sergeant Vasquez. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried over the helicopter noise as Elena climbed aboard. Outstanding work. Elena strapped herself into a seat and, finally, allowed herself to feel the exhaustion that had been building throughout the operation. Dr. Chun was safe, the research data was secure, and they were finally clear of the hostile forces that had dominated the valley below. As the helicopter lifted off, Elena looked down at the battlefield they were leaving behind. She could see smoke still rising from the damaged research facility and multiple groups of vehicles converging on the area where she had eliminated the search team. Dr. Chun, how are you feeling? Captain Rodriguez asked, his voice gentle despite the helicopter noise. Grateful to be alive, Dr. Chun replied, looking at Elena with obvious admiration. Your sergeant saved my life multiple times today. Elena felt uncomfortable with the praise. Just doing my job, ma'am. But Captain Rodriguez was studying Elena with an expression that suggested he understood exactly what she had accomplished during the operation. Elena, we'll debrief fully back at base, he said. But I want you to know that what you did today was exceptional, even by Ranger standards. Elena nodded acknowledgement, but remained focused on the tactical situation. They were not completely clear yet. Hostile forces in the area had access to anti-aircraft weapons, and the helicopter was vulnerable during the flight to safety. Through the helicopter's window, Elena could see the landscape passing below. The forest gave way to more open terrain, then to the foothills where the forward operating base was located. Each mile of distance made them safer from the threats they had left behind. Sergeant, Dr. Chun said, leaning closer to be heard over the helicopter noise. My research, it's not just about vaccines. Elena looked at the civilian researcher with renewed attention. Dr. Chin's expression had grown serious, almost troubled. The work I've been doing, Dr. Chun continued, it could be used to create biological weapons as easily as it could be used to create vaccines. That's why those people wanted it so badly. Elena understood immediately why Dr. Chin's rescue had been such a high priority. The research data in her equipment bag represented both tremendous potential for saving lives and tremendous potential for causing harm. The laptop, Elena said. Everything's on there. Dr. Chin nodded. 5 years of research. Breakthrough techniques for rapid vaccine development, but also detailed information about viral modification and enhancement. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, clearly interested in this new information. Dr. Chun, who else knows about your work? My research team, obviously, Dr. Chun replied. Government oversight committees, and apparently several groups willing to kidnap and kill for it. Elena realized that rescuing Dr. Chun was only the beginning. The information she carried would need to be protected, analyzed, and carefully controlled to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. The helicopter began its descent toward the forward operating base, and Elena could see the familiar sight of military vehicles, personnel, and defensive positions. For the first time in hours, she felt completely safe. As they landed, Elena helped Dr. Chin exit the helicopter and escorted her toward the base medical facility. Protocol required that all rescued hostages receive medical evaluation, regardless of apparent condition. Elena, Captain Rodriguez called as they walked across the landing pad. Report to my office after Dr. Chun is processed. We need to discuss your actions during the operation. Elena knew that conversation would include both commendation for mission success and serious questions about her decision to disobey direct orders. Rangers were expected to show initiative, but they were also expected to follow the chain of command. Elena delivered Chun to the medical personnel and watched as the researcher was taken for evaluation and debriefing. The laptop containing the research data was turned over to intelligence officers who would analyze its contents and ensure its security. An hour later, Elena sat in Captain Rodriguez's office, still wearing her combat gear and carrying the smell of smoke and gunpowder from the day's fighting. "Elena, let's start with the mission results," Captain Rodriguez said, consulting a folder of reports. "Dr. Chun is safe and unharmed. Her research data is secure. Alpha Team casualties are stable and will make full recoveries. Bravo Team completed their extraction without further casualties." Elena nodded, relieved to hear that the wounded Rangers are going to be okay. "Now, let's discuss your methods," the captain continued, his tone becoming more serious. "You disobeyed direct orders to hold position. You violated protocol by conducting a solo hostage rescue. You engaged multiple hostile forces without authorization." Elena had been preparing for this conversation since she turned off her radio and began her unauthorized approach to the building. "Sir, I assessed that, Dr. Chun would be killed if we waited for conventional extraction methods," Elena replied. "The window of opportunity was closing, and I had the position and capability to act." Captain Rodriguez studied her for several seconds. "Elena, your tactical assessment was correct. Your execution was flawless. Your results speak for themselves. But you violated the chain of command and put yourself at enormous risk." Elena understood the captain's position. Military discipline required that orders be followed, even when individual soldiers disagreed with tactical decisions. "Sir, I accept responsibility for my actions," Elena said. "I knew the risks and the consequences when I made the decision to proceed." Captain Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, clearly weighing multiple factors. "Elena, I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Service Cross," he said finally. "Your actions today saved a civilian hostage and secured research data that could impact national security." Elena was stunned. The Distinguished Service Cross was the second highest military decoration for valor, awarded only for extraordinary heroism in combat. "Sir, I was just doing my job," Elena replied. "No," Captain Rodriguez said firmly. "Your job was to provide overwatch and follow orders. What you did was go far beyond your assigned mission to accomplish something that conventional tactics couldn't achieve." Elena thought about the day's events. The impossible tactical situation, the wounded Rangers who needed extraction, Dr. Chun trapped in a building surrounded by hostile forces, and the split-second decisions that had determined who lived and who died. "Sir, any Ranger would have done the same thing," Elena said. Captain Rodriguez smiled. "Elena, that's exactly why you deserve the recognition. Rangers are taught to never quit and never leave anyone behind. You embodied those values under the most challenging circumstances possible." Elena felt a mixture of pride and humility. The day had tested every skill she had learned in 12 years of military service, and she had met challenges that would have been impossible just hours earlier. "There will be questions from higher command about your decision to act independently," Captain Rodriguez continued. "But the mission results will speak for themselves. Dr. Chun is alive, her research is secure, and our casualties were minimized." Elena nodded, understanding that military bureaucracy would require detailed analysis of every decision made during the operation. "Elena, I have one more question," the captain said. "When you were on that hilltop, surrounded by hostile forces and taking fire from multiple directions, what were you thinking?" Elena considered the question carefully. She remembered the moment when she had stood up from concealment, fully exposing herself to enemy fire to draw attention away from Bravo Team's extraction. "Sir, I was thinking that Rangers don't quit," Elena replied. "We had wounded personnel who needed help, and we had a civilian who was counting on us. Everything else was just tactical problems to solve." Captain Rodriguez smiled and stood up from his desk. "Elena, get some rest. You've earned it. Your debriefing with intelligence will be tomorrow morning." Elena stood and saluted, then headed for her quarters. As she walked across the base, she saw other Rangers who nodded respectfully or offered quiet words of congratulation. Word of the day's mission had spread, and Elena realized that her actions would be remembered long after the paperwork was filed. That night, Elena cleaned her rifle and equipment with the same careful attention she had given them for 12 years. The scope would need to be replaced, and several pieces of gear showed damage from the day's fighting. But Elena's confidence in her abilities and her commitment to the Ranger Creed remained unchanged. She had faced impossible odds and found a way to complete the mission. She had protected her teammates and rescued an innocent civilian. As Elena prepared for sleep, she thought about Dr. Chen's research and the potential impact it could have on saving lives around the world. The day's violence and danger had been necessary to protect something much larger than any individual mission. Elena had spent 12 years learning to be a ranger, and today she had proven that the training was worth every challenging moment. She had faced the ultimate test of her skills and determination, and she had not been found wanting. Rangers lead the way, and Elena Vasquez had led the way when it mattered most. The next morning, Elena woke to find a message that Dr. Chen wanted to speak with her before being transferred to a secure research facility. Elena found the researcher in the base's temporary quarters, looking rested and determined. "Sergeant Vasquez," Dr. Chen said, "I wanted to thank you personally before I leave. What you did yesterday was beyond heroic." "Dr. Chen, I was honored to help," Elena replied. "Your work is important." Dr. Chen smiled. "I've been thinking about that. The research I've been doing could change how we respond to disease outbreaks and biological threats. But it exists because of people like you who are willing to risk everything to protect others." Elena understood what Dr. Chen was saying. Scientific advances meant nothing if there weren't people willing to defend the civilization that made such advances possible. "Ma'am, Rangers exist to protect people who make the world better," Elena said. "Scientists, doctors, teachers, engineers. People like you who solve problems instead of creating them." Dr. Chun extended her hand to Elena. "Sergeant, if my research helps save lives, it will be because you made sure it survived yesterday." As Elena watched Dr. Chun board the transport aircraft that would take her to safety, she reflected on the interconnected nature of service and sacrifice. Rangers protected civilians, civilians advanced knowledge and healing, and together they built something worth defending. Elena returned to her duties with the satisfaction that comes from completing an impossible mission successfully. She had faced every challenge the day could present, and she had met each one with the skills and determination that defined the Rangers. Rangers lead the way, and Elena Vasquez had led the way home.